What's up everybody, Nitreg here from nitreg.com, and this is part 2 of a video on how to set up your HUD. For this video, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what all these different numbers mean. I went over how to set up your HUD in the first video, but what do all these numbers mean? Why do I use them? Well, we'll go over it in this video. So, first of all, this is the HUD. I just brought up the hand replayer, so it'll show you kind of what the HUD looks like in game. What I have across the top screen, or the top of the HUD, is the player's name followed by the number of hands. This is important because you want to know how many hands there are. If someone only has 48 hands on them, it's kind of hard to tell whether the stats are very accurate or not. But if you have something like 8,500, like this guy, then you're going to know that your stats are going to be pretty accurate on this guy. Also, you can go ahead and double click the guy's stats, and when it's highlighted in red here, it'll show you the guy's session stats. So obviously this is just a hand replayer, so it just says all of his hands are the last session. But when you're in session, you double click that, it'll kind of show you how a guy's playing. So that's important because some people will be super crazy one session and then tight for all their other sessions, whether it be due to tilt or whatever. It's good to know. So if you see someone playing kind of weird that's not really lining up with their stats, you might want to double check that by double clicking the black area in the back of the HUD, and you can go ahead and see kind of what they're playing like for that session. So let's go ahead and talk about the actual stats. So on this first row here, this 22 on my HUD is the VPIP, the voluntary put money in pot. VPIP is literally how many times they actually put money into the pot, which it has to be voluntary too, so it can't be just someone posting a blind or something like that. So that's really important because it'll tell you how many hands the person plays. So for this guy specifically, he plays 22%, so he's almost playing a quarter of his hands, which is quite a bit for folding. And then the next number, just to the right of that, is going to be the PFR, which is the pre-flop raise percentage. So that will tell you how many times he is raising pre-flop. And now, you can see that there's kind of like a little gap between these numbers, the 16 and the 22. So that means that 16% of the time he's raising pre-flop, and then 6% of the time he's calling pre-flop. So that kind of tells you what he's doing. He's playing a lot of hands. He's raising a lot of hands. And then I'll just kind of show you what's going on. If you look at this guy up here in the top left, Abakaisi Diaz, or whatever his name is, he is a 38-7. So usually if someone's saying 38-7, that means that they're talking about their VPIP and then their PFR. So you can see that he's playing 38% of hands, but he's only raising 7%. So this guy's very loose passive. Whereas this other guy, Worm Empire, down the bottom right, he's more of a loose aggressive player with a 22/16 stat. I think for this limit I was playing around 17/14, which is fairly loose aggressive, but when it's 22/16, that's really aggressive. This guy's playing a ton of hands. So that's that. The next number I have to the right of that is the aggression factor, not aggression frequency. Different people like different numbers here. I like the aggression factor. It's a mathematical formula that basically calculates the amount of times people bets and raises relative to the amount of times that they check and fold, something like that. And it comes out with this number. Basically, if their number is kind of between 2 and 4, that means that they're fairly aggressive. If it's lower than 2, that means that they're somewhat passive, and if it's higher than 4, it usually means that they're pretty aggressive. And it takes a couple hundred hands for you to get a good accurate number of this. Other people like to use aggression frequency, which is the percentage of the time that they do an aggressive action, and I'm not too familiar with this. I've always used aggression factor, and then when aggression frequency kind of was more introduced and more widely used, I kind of never jumped on that bandwagon, but a lot of people really like using the aggression frequency better, and it does look a lot more accurate than just looking at 4.1. Like, what does 4.1 mean? So I don't know, it's just something I'm used to, so I like it, but you guys can swap it out with aggression frequency, and I think that would work pretty well as well. And let's see. The next number here is their. Oh, I'm sorry. The next number is the little yellow number that's 35. This is their attempt to steal stat. So generally, if they're stealing about 30 to 40%, that's quite a bit, but that's fairly normal for a tag or a lag player. If they're stealing under that, they're not really stealing that often. If they're stealing over 40%, then they're stealing a ton. So this is a number that you're going to kind of want to look out for if you're in the blinds. Stealing basically means if you're on the cutoff, the button, or I think the small blind as well, and if it's folded around to you, do you try to steal the blinds? That's literally all it means. So I would look at that number. If you think people are trying to like steal your blinds all the time, first of all, it's fine. You know, they can steal their blinds, whatever. If they're stealing blinds like 20%, you just kind of want to let them steal your blinds if they happen to raise. They're going to be pretty tight, so you just kind of want to let them steal your blinds unless you have a big hand. But if they're starting to steal a lot, probably like anything over 35%, like this guy, then I would kind of look at some options here. He has a lot of really wide range. He has a really wide range in his hand, about a third of his hand range, and you know you could go ahead and 3-bet bluff. You can go ahead and call and try to dominate his hand range. You can go ahead and 3-bet for value if he calls a lot. There's different things you can do, so I would kind of look at that number. I think that's fairly important. The next and last number on this line, this number 65 here for Worm Empire, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer or not, but that number is their fold to steal, and that's a very important number, I think, because a lot of regs will have a very high fold to steal percentage. For instance, the guy right down here, LOL your Busto, he folds 83% to steals. This means against him, I can steal with any 2 cards. I can just min-raise him, and it's profitable. So that's a really good stat to have. What I do is I just go ahead and make it a big purple number so it sticks out to me. And if I notice that their numbers are high enough, I could literally just steal any 2 cards when I'm on the button, or a pretty wide range when I'm on the cutoff, depending on who's on the button for me. But yeah, you just want to go ahead and relentlessly steal against these guys. That's an easy way to just increase your win rate by like 1 or 2 big blinds. So that's the first row. For the second row, that we have the first number as the c-bet percentage. This is good because the first 2 numbers, let me go ahead and just mention, are c-bet flop and then c-bet turn percentage. So that will tell you how often people are continuation betting, and that's really good to know because you want to know of their pre-flop raising range. Well, for this, let's go up to Worm Empire again. Of the 16% of hands that he's raising with pre-flop, he's c-betting them 73% of the time. So it's quite a bit, and it's pretty high, especially considering that he has a much higher PFR than most people do. So I would say that a lot of times he's probably c-bet bluffing, and you might be able to exploit that by raising him sometimes or floating him. And then you can see on the turn he continues barreling quite a bit as well. He slows down just a little bit, but he still barrels quite a bit. The next 2 numbers on the right, and the last 2 numbers on the second line, or this second stat line, the 51 and the 18, those represent the fold to flop c-bet and fold to turn c-bet numbers. So that means if you raise pre-flop, how often is he going to fold the flop to you, and how often is he going to fold the turn to you? So basically, this guy doesn't really like to fold flops that often, and then turns, he really doesn't like to fold flops or fold turns. So that's good to know, because let's say you're playing against a guy. I don't know. Let's look at this guy. Let's go to Smokes at the very top of the screen here. He folds to flops 74%, but then he never folds to turn c-bets. So against this guy, you're going to want to exploit him by just c-bet bluffing a ton, and then just completely shutting down if he calls. You don't want to barrel turn against this guy. He will always have a hand. Whereas Worm Empire, he doesn't really seem to like folding flops that often, so you might not want to c-bet bluff him as often on certain boards, but you want to thinly value bet against him a little bit more. So those numbers are very important for me, and it kind of helps me set up my hands on whether I'm going to be multi-barrel bluffing, if I'm going to be thinly value betting. It really tells me a lot and kind of helps me organize my thoughts on how I'm going to approach a certain hand and a certain player, and help me exploit them and set up like a game plan with whatever specific hand I happen to have. So let's go down to the last line here. The last line here is a fun one. I like this this line a lot because it'll tell you their 3-bet percentage. Basically, if someone's making a play at you or you think they are, this is kind of like the line I look at. The first number is their 3-bet percentage. So 9.6% of the time in total, this guy is 3-betting me. You don't want to just look at this number though. You want to look at by positioning. So I go ahead and click on it because 9.6 doesn't really mean anything. That just means in total. But it'll kind of indicate that he's pretty 3-bet happy in general. But if we look by position in this little middle row here, he 3-bets 9.6% total, but it gets increasingly higher the further in position he is. So on the button, he 3-bets 9.1%, which is a lot. And then in the blinds, he's 3-betting a whole lot. So this guy's basically trying to make plays at people a lot. So I'd keep an eye on this guy. The number just to the right of that, the 66%, that's his fold to 3-bet percentage. There's a lot of people, especially people who seem fairly loose aggressive. Let's go to Smokes up here. He folds to 72% of 3-bets, and he has a 17% PFR. So obviously he's going to have a very wide range, and when you 3-bet him, he's just going to completely give up. So against this guy, you're going to want to 3-bet bluff him a lot. Whereas Worm Empire doesn't fold quite as much. So this means that he's going to probably be trying to, he's probably aware that he's super aggressive and you're probably going to be playing back at him at some percentage of the time. So he's going to try to play back at you by either 4-betting or flatting. So, you kind of want to pay attention to that if you decide to go ahead and bluff. Or on the reverse side, if you see a guy who just never folds to 3-bets, so for instance, this guy, he hasn't folded to a 3-bet yet, you might want to 3-bet him for thinner value, like ace-queen, ace-jack suited, pocket tens, pocket jack, stuff like that. You kind of want to work out ranges there. So this second to last number on the very bottom row, the 10, that is their check raise percentage. This is an important stat because people check raise sometimes, and usually people, I don't know, people usually play a certain way, and depending on what their check raise percentage is, you can kind of tell. Like a lot of regs just never check raise at all. Just even like really good regs, you'll see that they check raise like 2% of the time, and you're like, okay, well, his check raise percentage probably just means he has the nuts. But a guy like this who check raises 10% of the time and he's got a really wide hand range probably means he's trying to make moves on you more often than not. So let's say, for instance, you have an overpair and this guy check raises you on a wet board. I'm probably not folding. Whereas if some guy is never check raises and he goes ahead and check raises a wet board, I'll probably give him more credit for it. And I think you can make some folds with top pair in certain spots. So it's a good stat to have because you don't have to go fishing for it through your HUD. You can just look right here, and it'll kind of give you a hint as to how aggressive these guys are and how many times they make moves post flop. And then the last stat I think is fairly important, but you shouldn't use it like a crutch. You should use it more as a aid, I guess, is the went to showdown percentage. So that's how many times do they go to showdown with their hands. And if you're a good player, it should be around 25%. So if we look back up at this, let's go to Smokes guy. His is 18%. To me, that's saying that he's rarely going to showdown, so he's probably folding a lot, which makes sense because he has a very wide hand range. But then there's some guys, maybe not necessarily this guy, but a guy similar to this, he will have a very high win to showdown percentage, like 44%. This means that he is going down a showdown a lot, like almost twice as much as he should be, which means that you should basically never bluff him, especially on rivers. He's going to be calling down a lot. So I think those are very good stats to have. In the future, we'll go over how to exploit those stats and kind of how to think about those hands, but I just want to kind of give you guys an overall view of the stats that I use and why I use them and why I think that they're important. Okay, so if you haven't already, go ahead and check out part 1. You can download my HUD that I'm using here. If you don't have Holder Manager 2 yet, go ahead and go to nitreg.com/hem2, and you guys can go ahead and download a free trial there. I think they give you a month for free. So go ahead and check that out. I really love HEM2, and it works well. So thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.